Welcome. In front of me is a Realme C55, and today I'll go over unboxing along with a quick overview of this phone. So I just get straight into it. Now this phone is relatively new. It's from March 7th of 2023. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because the device is a little bit on the more budget side, or a lot on the budget side. But what I want to get at is the processor in here is severely outdated from what I can see. So yeah, anyway, I'm gonna get to it and later on once I actually get to the specs. So let's see what we get in the box, because there could be other things that make up for this. Now we do have a case for our device. Then we get a phone itself. Okay, so there we go. Now let's turn on the device, and while it's turning on, I'm going to quickly touch up on the screen right here. So this is an LCD IPS display with a 90 Hz refresh rate, a peak brightness of 680 nits. It has a 392 pixels per inch and resolution of 1080 by 2400. And when it comes down to screen to body ratio, it's 86.7% screen to body ratio. Now, that's basically the screen. Now, in a second, we should be able to see it once it turns on. But while it's turning on, I'm going to flip it over for the time being and just focus on the dual camera setup. Now, thank you for not including... never mind, I spoke too soon. So not only does it only have two cameras, one of them is still a shit camera, a sticker one. So we have a 64 megapixel wide sensor, which will be the top one right over here. And then below that we have a garbage 2 megapixel depth sensor, which contributes to absolutely effing nothing. So great job, you failed at that one. And now they could have just not included it, saved a little bit, make this phone a little bit even cheaper, and still the usability of this device would have been exactly the same. So there we go. Now, flipping it over, we have a selfie camera, and that's an 8 megapixel wide sensor. Now with all of these, at least at the back, I can shoot at 1080p 60 frames max, and at the front, 1080p 30 frames max. Now, once, as you can see, the device is on, you can see the bezels right here. They're fairly minimal. The chin is a little bit thicker than any other sides, but it's still, I would say, manageable. It still looks pretty modern and obviously nice. Now, I don't really know why I'm going to the setup, so let's just touch upon other things. So in terms of the internals right here, there is a couple of versions, actually a lot of them. So depending on which one you will go for, obviously the price will vary. Now, the one that I have, it's the 8GB 256 storage, so 8GB RAM. So it is literally the highest end of version right here. Now at the very lowest one, you can get 64 gigs of storage with 4 gigs of RAM, which 4 gigs might be a little bit on a lower side in terms of RAM. Storage wise, I believe we can probably expand it using a... nope, that's a little bit too thick. Let me just quickly get a little tool right here. So I wanna just pop out the tray just to see. There we go. Yep, so we have a SD tray right here. So we can put two different SIM cards in here and SD tray. So if you go for the 64GB storage, it should still be pretty decent, considering you can just use a SD card to expand it further if you need more storage. Now what you won't be able to extend is the amount of RAM, which at the very base version of this, it comes with only 4 gigs. So if anything, I would probably recommend going for the second lowest end version, which is the 64 with 6 gigs of RAM. So you get 2 more gigabytes of RAM, which will help you just get to apps a little bit quicker. So more apps will be able to stay open in the background without the phone needing to terminate them. So when you're swapping between them, you will have them like literally stay open and you can just instantly get back to them. Considering with the 4 gigs, you might encounter things like you leave the app and you come back to it and it needs to literally reload again, like you're just opening it up for the first time. So you might want to go for the 6 gigs, which will be a little bit better. Now there's also 128 gigs storage with 6 gigs, 128 gigs storage with 8 gigs, and then 256 with 8 gigs, which this is the version that I have right here. So there we go. Now this device is being powered by a Helio G88 processor, which is at this point, I believe, like a 2-year-old processor. So obviously not the newest one, and when it was released, it was at the more low to mid-range. So having this be released at this, well, for a phone like this at 2023, with such a relatively old processor, I think is a little bit of a, I don't know, doesn't really rub me the right way. But at least a lot of the other things here make up. So we also have a whopping 5000 milliamp hour battery and a pretty decent charging speed for it with 33 watts. And lastly, the price of this device is pretty competitive, coming at about $165 US. So for this price, if you're looking for a budget device, one that you can just, I don't know, for instance, buy and have it for like some, I don't know, maybe trips, and you don't really mind if it gets damaged or something happens to it. Obviously the price here isn't egregious, and the phone should still run relatively well. Obviously it won't be winning any kind of speed awards right here, but for the typical use it will get you through, especially if you're like on vacation and you just didn't want to take your actual phone that you maybe normally use. And obviously for just, I don't know, maybe some your kid or something like that, this phone should be also pretty good. It might not be the best for gaming, I'll point that out. Actually, let me just skip this, there we go. So I want to finish up the setup just so you can see how navigating to the device looks like, because you get to sometimes see how quickly it gets through different things. If it like starts lagging when it's set up without anything, that's usually not the best sign, I would say. Right now it might seem a little bit slower than it actually is, just because right after the setup it will be loading a bunch of different things in the background. So apps and notifications and just checking for updates and all that stuff. As you can see, it still gives me some garbage, but once it loads it up, it seems to be running pretty well. So there we go. Now, like I mentioned, for gaming, obviously this won't be necessarily the fastest phone, but for typical usage, picking up calls, messaging, YouTube watching, Netflix, and all that stuff, it will get you through without a single problem. So there we go. Now, like I said, the processor right here was probably, I would say, one of the weaker parts of this, but I do want to point out that this device only costs $165, so it's not the cheapest one by all means. But it's in this like low end price, and it still performs pretty well and comes with a 90 Hz refresh rate, which I personally like to see on just any kind of device. It just makes the device feel much nicer than it would typically be with like a 60 Hz. And a couple additional things that I'll mention right before I finish it off is we have a fingerprint sensor on the power button right over here, and we also have a headphone jack right at the bottom right over here. So there we go, Type-C charging port, and that's about all the worth mentioning parts of the device. Build quality wise, we have a plastic back, plastic frame, and obviously the glass front. So not the most resistant device. GRB rig bend test probably wouldn't last that well. But for, I don't know, like typical usage, like I mentioned, most of us don't really try to fold our phones, so candy bar phones I mean, so this phone should still do pretty well. So anyway, with this being said, If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.